Welcome to the Raise Our Awareness Revolution, Humanity's Roar. I'm Vinci the Truth, and this is the catalyst to the Great Awakening. Now, many of you are familiar with the term the Great Awakening. This is what many of us believe is happening right now, and we are essentially awakening to our divinity, and we are waking up from this lie that we are separate, that we as individuals are unrighteous and unworthy, and that we need, or I should say, we are lacking from birth if we don't partake in certain rituals, if we don't associate with a specific group that believes a certain way, then we are going to be damned to eternal suffering in hell. We are waking up to the idea that that is false and not the true nature of reality and not representative of our true nature as divine beings that are experiencing this realm for the purpose of the experience, to experience that which we are not. On the other side, our soul, our core essence is unconditional love. And all of the near-death experiences and the out-of-body experiencers that are growing by the numbers, they experience this firsthand on the other side, and they come back saying that this experience of that unconditional love is so profound and has such a huge impact on your understanding of yourself and the nature of reality that, for one, oftentimes they're no longer afraid of death, but two, and most importantly, they recognize that the whole purpose of this experience is much simpler than we've been led on to believe. And so the question is, can humanity unite in truth, in the deepest fundamental truth of the nature of our being and the nature of reality? And I think now we are finally at a point in time where we can, and what do you know, it's right on time according to the clockwork of the stars. And many religious people aren't allowed to know that information. Only people that have realized that, you know what, I am not a slave to any man intellectually. I have nothing to fear in my pursuit of truth as long as I'm honest. Because if you're honest and you do your due diligence and you research all these different religions and worldviews and ways of life, whatever conclusion you come to, if you're seeking truth and you're seeking to become the best version of yourself and essentially do God's will or the will of whatever magnificent force created all of this, if that's your goal and you come to a conclusion that is outside of the truth, if your intentions are genuine, no creator, when you cross over, could ever possibly be upset with you. And considering we can't trust authorities, especially in today's world, I think the more we have a hard time trusting authorities of today, it becomes even harder to buy into this idea that we should trust the authorities thousands of years ago that tell us this specific text in the exact way that it was written, never mind that there's thousands of different interpretations after multiple translations. These certain groups of people say that we must believe it this certain way, and if we don't, then we're damned. And that just gets into, the idea that we should be coerced into the truth. And that's the problem with belief. And so, again, back to the question, can we unite in the actual truth in a way that transcends religion, or at least this debate that seems to be never ending, and only further divides humanity? And so I think the answer is yes. And I think there's one Bible, one chapter in Matthew that really answers this question in a way that reconciles all religions. It addresses and essentially validates what the Great Awakening movement is all about. And it also is in line with the frontier of science in consciousness, or I should say how quantum physics has contributed to this understanding of consciousness being fundamental, and also the work of guys like Joe Dispenza, as it relates to vibration and frequency and our energetic nature, our electromagnetic physical field that we all have but just can't see and aren't aware of. There's one Bible verse, the one that we're about to read in Matthew, that I believe encapsulates all of this, and again reconciles all religions, brings it under one umbrella, and at the same time simplifies this deepest truth. I believe the one that has eluded humanity for thousands of years. And ultimately, it hinges on our divinity and our nature of an unconditionally loved soul and a soul of unconditional love. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this here, and then I'll be back with a little more commentary. It says in Matthew 25, starting at verse 31, it's the sheep and the goats. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Then he'll say to those on the left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and all his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." So right there, that is essentially telling us that how we treat each other is how we treat God. Or when we are treating other people a certain way, that is how we are treating God. And in today's world of religion, especially with everyone believing that if you don't believe a certain thing, then you're going to be damned for all of eternity, we find ourselves focused on what we believe, and we get lost in that, and it just, again, it's part of this endless religious debate where we're always judging each other. But based on that Bible verse, or those verses, it basically is saying that how you treat others, that's how you treat God. And so in being lost in this endless debate, we're always asking people, "Oh, have you been saved?" or "What do you believe?" and then judging them afterwards. But that's not what it's about. It's said right there. It's about how we treat each other. And when we're treating each other a certain way, that's exactly what we're doing to God. And so in this Great Awakening, this is where it gets interesting. Philosophically, if we are all divine manifestations and expressions of the source, the creator, well, then it makes sense that when we treat other people a certain way, they are all divine manifestations of God. And so, yes, that's exactly how we're treating God. And so it's in line with this. And so when you talk to people about this concept of awakening to our divinity, they can't stand it. They struggle with it. They tell you, "You're not God," and I understand that, because it can be taken in a way of sounding prideful. But again, I'm not saying that I'm God exclusively. I'm not even saying that I'm God in a way that I should be able to treat people however I want and it doesn't matter. No, I'm an unconditionally loving God, and I am one with all of creation, and everyone else is me, but in a holographic, fractalized way, which is why quantum physics is helpful in this conversation, because it helps you understand that the nature of reality is abstract and very difficult to understand or perceive. And so I would go a step further, though, and say, let's just move beyond whether or not we believe it or not. Let's just say, if we did believe that everyone was God himself, or at least a holographic version of him, or that the kingdom of God was within that human being, and God was the spirit that gave that being life. And so if we, in other words, saw God through and through in every human being, well, then maybe we would start treating each other with more respect. And so if I just entertain the idea that each and every one of us is God in a unique way, then again, I think that's the healthiest way to look at life. And on top of that, if you see yourself as that same God, well then, for one, we all want that connection. We all want to be loved by God, but if we could identify as God, that's the closest you can get to having a relationship with God. Now, again, it's in a abstract and paradoxical way. And so, yes, you have a relationship with God separately, as in you can communicate with him, but he is also you, and you are also him. Or if you look at it like water, let's imagine God is a source of spirit that flows like water. If I take water from over in Fiji and I bottle it and I send it to the United States, and I buy that water and I drink that water, I'm drinking Fiji water. Now, would I say that water is any different than the source of that water? No. This water is the source, but it's not, because the source is over there. This water is in this vessel, though, but it's the same thing. And so, without getting too far into the occult, ancient knowledge of the laws of the universe, and how that is directly related to the energy centers within our body, I want to stick with the idea that the healthiest way for all of us to perceive ourselves and to perceive each other is to perceive all of us as God. And I think the Abrahamic faiths especially won't have this. They can't accept this, and I think that's a problem, because if it is the healthiest way to look at life, if it does lead to the best coexistence and the best ability for ourselves, each individual, to develop and become the best version of ourselves, well, then we should take a very hard look at it and ask ourselves, could it possibly be the truth? Could it be the true nature of reality? And I think, for one, again, in my own life and in millions of other people's lives around the world, in a growing number every single day, people are experiencing this. I've experienced this. It changes you, because you no longer feel insecure. You no longer feel incomplete. You no longer feel like you're stained with original sin. Although I had the blessing of being raised Catholic, so I was able to avoid all that with the sacraments that they had provided me. Thank goodness they did, because otherwise I would have just been some lost soul that God didn't even know, and I would just, who knows what would have happened. But that entire idea is not healthy to have as an individual. And it's not healthy for society, because for those that aren't worthy through the participation in any one religion, What, do we look down on them? The funny thing is we do. Now, we will say that we don't, but I know this to be true because I was raised Catholic. I now have a worldview that is based in this Bible passage, and also based in what all the ancient mystery schools were saying, the Hermetic principles, Eastern philosophy, and our chakras being a mirror of that, the macrocosm and the microcosm, and then, near-death experiences by the millions upon millions. They're saying, there's a recent study, 1 in 25 people now have had a near-death experience, and these near-death experiences come back saying things that are one of unity in spirit, one of all of us being divine. They talk about how judgment is not God judging us on the other side, but in fact, we are judging ourselves. And yes, it's crushing when we have to relive our life in our life review in what these near-death experiencers talk about on the other side before they come back and tell about it. They talk about this life review where everything that they did, whether it was good or bad, they felt it times like 10,000. So if they hurt someone, they felt it, and it crushed them. And when they did something as simple as smiling at someone and waving, they felt the good, the ripple effect from all that. And they come back saying, basically echoing this idea that we are all divine. And then when you look closely at what Jesus taught, it's exactly what he taught. Again, this Bible verse, what you do to the least of my brethren, or least of your brothers and sisters, you did unto me. So in order to avoid the consequences associated with that Bible passage, then it would be best for us to see God in everyone, to see everyone as God, unconditional love, aligned with virtue, responsibly aware of our divinity, recognizing that with great power comes great responsibility, and knowing that we are the judge. In light of the truth, when we cross over to the other side, we will judge ourselves. And what do you know? We are oftentimes our harshest critic, and that's how it is on the other side. In fact, when I started, years ago, when I initially started to entertain this idea and come to this understanding, it was very, very almost immediate, within a week, that I was night and day to what I was. There's a real experience when you find yourself not just loved by God or in his good grace, but when you identify as the source of love itself, there's a sense of ownership and empowerment. And because your identity is now derived from what you understand to be love and the source of that love and light, not only is it easier for it to just radiate from you, but that calling, that responsibility, and that acknowledgement that the last person you want to upset in life is yourself. And so once you recognize that that's who you're hurting when you hurt others, that sense of ownership, it makes everything more real. The last thing you want to do is get to the other side and find out, oh man, this whole experience was for me to experience love and to make the most of this opportunity. And everywhere I went, I hurt others. And so we're living in the eternal present moment at all times. That's why the present is a gift. It is that magical moment where you can make the most of it day in and day out. And I think that until we start seeing the divine in everything, until we start accepting that and owning it and recognizing our power, but humbly, responsibly, and with an inspiration that drives your actions to live a selfless life as often as possible, because you know that what you do for other people in every single moment is what you are doing for God. It becomes, God goes from being far away to now he's everywhere you look. And so if you're feeling down, go talk to God. Just walk out your front door. He's out there. Go interact with him. And that's not to say you can't have a personal, relationship with God. If you talk to him, he will communicate back with you. Again, it gets into a very abstract and paradoxical concept, the nature of reality and this co-creative experience of life, but it is real. And anyone that's experienced it knows that it does make you the best version of yourself. It does bring to you a sense of peace and security, and it allows you to focus on what this life is really about. And that's ultimately the mission here. Again, this is the Raise Our Awareness Revolution, humanity's roar, because it is so simple and it's so satisfying in terms of the security and just the awareness you develop and the relationship that you have with the world once you understand this in this way, that you feel that, knowing that, or I believe that the people at the top, the rulers of this realm, this is what the secret societies have hidden from us. This is that ancient wisdom. And so when you find out we've been lied to, now granted, I do believe most of the people atop these religious hierarchies aren't aware of this truth, but for the ones that are, they essentially have been hiding this. Now granted, it's probably for the purpose of the divine stage play, and now we're getting into even more of the occult, understanding the cycle, the great year, and so I don't want to. I'll save that for another video. But that's why I love the acronym ROAR, because when you wake up from that sleepwalking slumber as a sheep, and you recognize humbly that you are a divine lion, and you are going to be your harshest critic, and your eternal soul is what either thrives or suffers from your actions. When you recognize that you're here to either hurt yourself or help yourself or care for yourself, it just becomes all the more real to you. And when you start seeing other people as opportunities to interact with God and develop a relationship with God, it becomes, again, all the more real. And so I think there's power in the symbolism that underpins this great awakening. And that is, again, that we are lions, not sheep. We are all divine manifestations and expressions of the Creator. And once we come together with one voice or one roar, and we recognize these deep spiritual truths, we will begin to lay a new foundation for the world. And it's right on time. The clockwork of the stars, ancient calendars, all the prophecies all line up to this moment. And so I don't think it's a coincidence either. Even the Catholic Church has their St. Malachi prophecy that this is the last pope, or you've got Luisa Picaretta and the Divine Will prophecy. You got tons of, probably even the Hopi Indians, and the list goes on. From the Mayan calendar to the zodiac to the Hindu Yuga cycle, we are at a point where we are transitioning from ignorance and separation and intellectual enslavement and insecurity and fear and shame and guilt, unworthiness, unrighteousness. We are transitioning now to a higher vibration, one of love, oneness, authenticity, coexistence, and that is built in an understanding that we are all one human family in spirit. And this is exactly what Jesus Christ came to teach us 2,000 years ago. And so I think we live in the most exciting time we could ever be living in. And so I'm excited for the future. Thank y'all for listening. Once again, humanity's roar, the Raise Our Awareness Revolution. We are transitioning from covenants and commandments to principles and awareness. And we are lions, not sheep, humble and responsible at this point to step into this awareness of our divinity and the awareness of oneness and everything that comes with that. And so, I'm Da Vinci the Truth. Y'all take care. Love.